You remember when people just disappeared. Not dramatically, not permanently. They moved, changed schools, got a different job, and unless you had their home phone number written in a notebook somewhere, that was it. They became a memory you carried alone. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you belong to what researchers call a microgeneration. Not quite Gen X, definitely not millennial. You're a Xennial, and there's a specific kind of exhaustion you carry that nobody else quite understands. It's not physical fatigue, it's chronological exhaustion. You feel older than you are because you've lived 2 full lifetimes in the span of 40 years. You are a biological bridge between 2 completely different eras of human consciousness. And the friction between those 2 worlds is wearing you down in ways you might not even have words for yet. Here's what makes you different. You still feel a subconscious hit of dopamine when a physical phone rings, but you almost never answer it. You know exactly how to navigate a paper map, but you're completely paralyzed if your GPS loses signal for 10 seconds. You show up 5 minutes early to every meeting because you grew up in a world where on time meant you were already late, and there was no way to text running behind to a landline. You probably carry a physical notebook or pen, not because you're rejecting technology, but because your brain trusts the tactile feedback of ink more than the ethereal nature of a cloud-based app. You meticulously organize your digital files into folders because you remember when finding something meant physically looking through a drawer. You still buy physical copies of books you love because, deep down, you don't entirely trust that the internet will be here forever. You rehearse grocery store interactions in your head, not from social anxiety, but from a residual habit of efficiency from when human interaction was a primary unedited event. You look at a sunset and feel a split-second urge to photograph it, followed immediately by a wave of exhaustion at the thought of sharing it. You are caught in what psychologists are beginning to call the analog-digital cusp, and it's not just about nostalgia. It's about maintaining 2 completely separate operating systems in one brain. What's happening inside you is a form of dual environment cognitive load. Research on brain development shows that the environment we occupy during our developmental window, roughly ages 12 to 22, permanently wires our expectations of the world. For you, that window was split down the middle. You had pre-digital socialization during your formative years, then digital saturation hit during early adulthood. This created something specific. A high internal locus of control grafted onto a foundation of uncertainty tolerance. Let me explain. During your pre-digital years, you learned that if you wanted to know something, you went to a library. If you wanted to see someone, you had to be where you said you'd be. You were the primary agent of your own information foraging. Your outcomes depended entirely on your actions, your memory, your follow-through. Then the digital shift occurred. Suddenly, information was instant but unreliable. Connections were constant but shallow. Your brain had to overlay an entirely new system onto the old one, and it created permanent cognitive dissonance. You want the stability of the analog world, but you're forced to compete in the volatility of the digital one. Attachment theory plays a role here too. Many Xennials developed what researchers might call an avoidant secure hybrid. You're secure in your ability to survive offline. You know how to fix things, how to be bored, how to wait, but you're avoidant of the hypersurveillance of the modern social web. You feel older because you remember what it was like to be anonymous. But here's where it gets complicated. The reason you feel like you've aged a century since 2005 isn't just about technology changing. It's about a fundamental shift in the nature of utility itself. In the late 90s and early 2000s, technology was a tool you used to enhance your life. You sat at a computer. You finished a task. You walked away. Today, you're not using the technology. The technology is using you. You are the data. You are the content. You are the engagement metric that feeds the algorithm. And as a Xennial, you're acutely aware of this shift because you remember the before time, when the computer was a destination, not a constant companion. Younger generations don't feel the weight of this because they have no baseline for silence. They don't know what they're missing. Older generations often dismiss the digital world as something they can simply opt out of. But you can't opt out. You are what some sociologists are starting to call the bridge generation. You build the systems, you manage the teams, you raise the children, you troubleshoot your family's Wi-Fi, and then spend the weekend in the woods without a phone. But you never feel fully settled in either place. You are the cultural translator between two groups of people who speak entirely different languages of intent. And translation is exhausting work. This is the core contradiction of the Xennial identity. You are self-sufficient but secretly craving relief. You are digitally fluent but nostalgically exhausted. You are independent because you had to be, yet you're worn down by the constant demand for your attention. You're skeptical of the new, yet you're the first person everyone calls when something breaks. You're a guardian of the analog past, even as you pioneer the digital future. Both sides are logical adaptations. Your self-reliance came from a childhood where your parents didn't know where you were for hours at a time, and that was normal. You learned to solve problems alone, to entertain yourself, to deal with boredom without immediate intervention. But your digital fluency came from entering adulthood right when the internet promised to connect everyone and solve everything. Before we all realized it might be making some things more complicated. You can hold both, but holding both has a cost. There's a quiet loss at the center of the Xennial experience, the safety of forgetting. You grew up in the last era where mistakes were undocumented. Your teenage embarrassments, your early heartbreaks, your awkward transitions, they're safely tucked away in shoeboxes under beds, not indexed in a searchable database. But now, you live in a world where everything is permanent. This creates a hypervigilance that ages the soul. You're constantly monitoring your digital footprint while mourning the time when a footprint was just something left in dirt. You're mourning the patience that boredom used to build, those long, slow afternoons that forced you to think, to imagine, to simply exist without a feedback loop. You feel old because you're grieving a version of humanity that allowed for growth without a witness. And you're doing it in real time, while everyone around you moves forward without noticing what was left behind. But here's what you need to understand. That chronological exhaustion isn't dysfunction. It's evidence of immense skill. You are essentially operating as a biological index of what it means to be human in both worlds. You understand the value of a deep, focused hour of work. You know that stability isn't something you find online. It's something you build in the physical world. You can navigate digital complexity while maintaining analog values. In a world that keeps changing faster than anyone expected, being the bridge is heavy work, but it's also vital work. You're not just an old millennial or a young Gen Xer. You are the keepers of a transition that will never happen again in human history. You carry dual environment cognition that allows you to see what was gained and what was lost. And that perspective is increasingly rare. Bridges bear weight. That's what they're built for. The feeling of being older isn't premature aging. It's pattern recognition across discontinuous systems. It's the psychological signature of someone who lived through a phase transition and retained both states. You're not falling behind. You've just traveled further than most people realize. If this finally put words to that strange, quiet fatigue you carry, subscribe. I make content like this, diving into the hidden psychology of how we actually live. I've got other videos exploring this from different angles, and I'd love to have you in the conversation. Take a breath. You're exactly where you need to be.